recorded. Yes, exactly. Yeah, just to kick things off. So next gen, never settle, and all the conversations we're having today are all focused on empowering women, helping you know your worth, building confidence, and reframing what success looks like. And the companies that Kylie and I are part of, so Reverb and then Geek Girl Careers respectively, abide by all these values. And we've been having so many similar conversations with our friends about these topics that we knew we had to put this event together. We're so excited to get started. And with that, I'll hand it off to Kylie to introduce our sponsors, without whom we wouldn't have been able to make this happen.
Yeah, hi everyone. So as Sandhya touched on, when we were planning this event, we were really committed to paying our speakers for their time and expertise. We really believe that compensation is critical, and so that meant finding a sponsor whose mission and vision aligned with our own. As a result, we are so excited to have the generous financial support of the Washington Technology Industry Association. So for those of you that don't know, the WTIA is a Washington state trade association that serves technology and professional employer groups. They consolidate the power of member companies to solve business challenges that they cannot easily solve alone. So thank you to the WTIA. Now, maybe this is because my personal love language is gifts, but one thing that Sandy and I miss the most about in-person events is the swag, just being very honest. So we're really excited to partner with 4 small women-owned businesses for this event. So you all will get swag packages if you haven't gotten them already, with stickers and other goodies from these wonderful women. So I'm going to introduce 2 of them now. I'll just go through their bios and then I'll introduce 2 later. So the first is Kate Saylor. So Kate is a Seattle-based self-taught digital artist. As a bisexual Chinese adoptee, her work focuses on portraits and people portraying different causes that she finds important. Kate has created series surrounding body positivity and eating disorders, iconic women who have influenced her life, the Larry Nassar survivors, racism, and LGBT rights. This past year, Kate ran 5 different fundraisers all over Instagram, and she raised over $9,000 for COVID relief, BLM, wildfire relief, suicide awareness, and most recently, the civil disobedience movement in Myanmar. Next, we have Bella Wolf. So Bella is the owner of Just Be Kind Co. And Just Be Kind Co. is a small business with a range of products. They're all designed and drawn by her, and they include stickers, apparels, and masks, and more. About 8 months ago, she started her company with the goal of making the world a kinder and more positive place. So thank you to both Bella and Kate, and we'll introduce the other 2 towards the middle. And now we're going to kick off with our first panel. So I'm going to welcome 2 incredible forward-thinking women, Leonie Wurakun and Mita Roy. So Leonie is a founder and operator. Her work has contributed to 3 M&As and over 6,000 new jobs. Leonie has served as an advisor and founding operator to top 20 Fortune 500 companies, bringing industries up to speed with humanity and an intersection of tech. Her multicultural heritage and life experience are the authentic reference points for her ability to impact and have a strong understanding of diversity and inclusion. So welcome, Leonie. We're so excited you're here. Our next panelist is Mita Roy. So Mita has nearly 20 years of experience in the tech industry. She's led product development teams to deliver global launches, been a C-suite strategic advisor, and facilitated operations between teams to build and launch products that impact brand image, internal development, and business growth. She's also the founder of Mirora, you'll have to correct me if I said that wrong, which is an apparel and accessories brand that's reclaiming the word geek. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Sandhya for our panel.
Yay, okay, so excited to get started. Just 2 housekeeping things. If you have any questions over the course of the panel, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And also, if you're following along with the Never Settle guidebook, the page that correlates to the panel is page 9. So with that, we'll get started. And the first question is, So many of us put so much pressure on ourselves to abide by a specific timeline when it comes to our careers. But in reality, so much of it is out of our control. And I think the best example of that has been this past year. So, would you feel comfortable sharing what you thought your career was going to look like when you were in your early 20s versus how it actually ended up playing out? And Mita, would you like to go? Would you like to start?
Yeah, look, if I look back at what I thought I was going to be and where I was going to be in life in my early 20s, I would be completely off the path that I thought I was supposed to be on. I think, as you're getting out of college and you're trying to figure out what you do, you set these really big goals, which is amazing, right? You have to set goals. But I think the thing that I didn't really know and I didn't learn was setting these little micro goals, like smaller, little more tangible goals that I know that I can reach that's going to get me to the bigger picture. Having said that, if I think about 10 years ago, I would have felt like I was off track. If I think about where I am now, 10 years later from that, I feel like I'm right in the place where I need to be. My career hasn't actually gone in the path that I thought it would. It's definitely not linear. It's gone in lots of different curves and directions, but where I am today is where I think I should be, which is around growth, taking on new opportunities, taking on projects that stretch me and what I'm trying to do. And it's about having a network of colleagues and a network of peers and people around you who are going to support you and kind of, work on projects with you, call you on opportunities that come their way. And so my advice is think big, of course, but also know that you have to pivot and your career path is going to have to pivot a little bit, and where you thought you were supposed to be 5 years ago could change, and that's okay, as long as you are making the strides to get to what you think your end goal is.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to that, I 1000% agree with Mita. Geez, when I first started my career, I was actually in my late teens, and I was a fashion illustrator. And at the time, even from when I was much younger, I always thought I was going to be a fashion designer. I was good at it. I loved designing, loved creating, loved being very crafty. And I actually also went to college to go and study fashion illustration and design. But when I was in college, I ended up realizing that I was just needing a bit more. And there was something innately within me that kept desiring to create a bigger impact than what I had envisioned at that time being able to do and accomplish with fashion designing. Like Mina said, there's so many turns and twists and bumps that I experienced as well. And at times it's very challenging to have to think, oh, you keep comparing yourself to maybe others or to what you envisioned yourself to be, and you set these huge milestones. I think I was the roughest and the toughest on myself in my 20s because I had to prove myself in so many different ways. And then once I got to 30s, it's okay, you can relax. It's not really that serious. It's good to find a balance in between. But just to highlight what Mita had said, I definitely, my career, I've been a teacher, I've been a fashion illustrator, an operator, an analyst, a founder, went into international relations, now an emerging fund manager. I think the story becomes more clear as you just get through it. For those who don't really take the very traditional linear paths, which my background is very unconventional, non-linear. Yeah. But one thing that Sandia, when we all spoke last time, is one way that always helped me sort of gather my story together was just thinking through my CV, honestly, and my resume, and being able to actually read it out loud and say, okay, this is the linear thread that followed me throughout. These were the skills that were translatable from being an illustrator to being a founder and emerging fund manager. So definitely not linear.
Definitely. And kind of going off of that, like I know both of you touched on like so many different pivots and you went through so many different industries and roles. So as you're figuring all of that out and like your timelines change and your goals change, how do you still make sure that you're kind of proactively working towards where you want to be, or like certain broader goals or dreams that may not change as much? Like, what are some tangible or proactive steps people can take?
I think you have to really immerse yourself in knowledge, right? Like, what are the things that are going to make me successful, either in this role or in something I want to learn? Or, you leverage your mentors, you leverage all the articles that are out there, you leverage, all the skills that you think this job is going to need. And you keep building on it. And I think you should absolutely take the time to keep learning. Either it's be through your job, right? Sometimes they offer some really great kind of courses and coursework and things like that, or you start to explore externally yourself. I mean, there's so many amazing resources, and with YouTube and all of that, it's easy to find some great resources. But I think it's always good to also look at other job descriptions and kind of see the skill sets that are in those JDs and see, like, okay, I don't necessarily have this skill set. What can I do to learn it? But I know that we touched a little bit on transferable skills. I'm a huge advocate that there's so many transferable skills that'll help you learn things in the next role that you want to take. It's just understanding what you're good at and how you can apply that to kind of the next role or your next goal. But always make sure that you're checking back, right? It's easy. If you think about like OKRs, I don't know if you guys do OKRs at work, but you have to do a mid-quarter check-in and then kind of end of quarter check-in. And you're really evaluating what went well, what didn't go so well. Do I need to double down on something, or do I need to kind of pivot or maybe put that aside? And I think you have to kind of take those same steps in your career to say, okay, maybe this wasn't a good time for this now. Do I want to work on it later? Or maybe it's just not part of my skill set. So just reevaluating as you're learning.
Definitely, that's really helpful. Leonie, is there anything?
Yeah, and I will add to the transferable skills. So one thing, when back in 2015, I had actually started or realized that there's so many individuals that are trying to re-enter the workforce or change their transition from one job to the next. Many of us, especially when we're younger, often will accept roles because even as a woman, we are sometimes faced with having to accept what's on the table and not always being able to understand even what we're good at or what our passions. It's easy for someone to say, follow your passion, follow your dream, but not all of us have that opportunity to understand and really figure out what that is. So I had actually put together Beam, which was this platform that was able to promote recovery essentially. And what I realized doing all this research was that there are about 12,000 different careers that exist. Right? How many of you actually know what those, how many of us actually know more than maybe 30 different careers that are out there? And because there are 12,000, I mean, we can probably imagine that there are skill sets that are definitely transferable across sectors and industries that you may not even think about or don't even know that they exist, that these jobs exist. So if you're not going to use a platform like that, or go through some type of fancy algorithm, what I would suggest is definitely, as Mita said, go through job descriptions, but also ask questions. Ask hundreds of questions and try to figure out through mentors. And if you don't have mentors, try to find people online or for a role that might interest you, and just see if they have 15 minutes of time for you to just ask questions about what does their role look like? What does the industry look like? And then start eliminating the things that you're not interested in, so you can ultimately narrow down what you are interested in, because there are obviously so many different things that exist, and sometimes you might get distracted and have many different interests. But if we can eliminate what we definitely don't want to do, then that would be a good way to understand, okay, what are the other transferable skills? What are the other jobs that exist for us to sort of jump into?
Definitely. And that's actually a great segue into our next question, because I feel like figuring out what you want to do is already so difficult. And then the job search and application process doesn't make it any easier. And I know like statistically, even speaking of transferable skills, like there's so many statistics that men apply to jobs when they meet like 20 to 30% of qualifications, and women only apply when they have at least 70% of the qualifications for a job. And then you also look at these entry level jobs that require like 3 to 5 experiences or a ton of required skills. And it can be like, it's just overwhelming to kind of navigate all of that. And it's sometimes hard to maintain confidence during the job search process. So do you have any advice on how to maintain confidence when you're going through that process? And then also, if you do you have any advice on applying to jobs that you may not feel that you're qualified for?
This is a great question. It's funny because I do have this conversation a lot with my male mentors and colleagues and try to think about the way that they approach it. And really it comes down to, we all have transferable skills. And if you can look at that job description and say, hey, I know I can do this much of it. This piece of it I need to learn, but here's how I'm going to learn. And here's the plan that I'm going to make to get there. I think people really appreciate that. And I think you should have an open mind as to not everybody knows the job that they're doing. And quite frankly, those of us that excel the most are probably excelling at something that's new and different because you're putting a little bit more brain power into it, right? You're like trying to figure it out. And you're like, this is something new and challenging. And so I would say as you're having these conversations, a lot of these jobs also, it's not when you apply online, right? It's speaking to people, it's having a connection who's going to make another connection, who's going to make another connection for you, right? And being able to really translate what your passion is and where you see yourself going with that opportunity is really what matters. It's not necessarily always about that very specific job description.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, so the first part of your question, which was, sorry, Sandhya, was it applying to something that, because I know there were two parts to the question, was
Yeah.
it to something that you might not be qualified for or that you might not feel confident?
Yeah, so kind of both. So like, how do you maintain confidence through the job search process, like when you're applying to a ton of jobs and maybe not hearing back from the ones you want? And then also advice on just like making the push and applying for jobs that you may not feel confident or you may not feel qualified for.
So I'll start with the latter. If there's a role that you want to strive for and you feel you're lacking confidence or lacking skill set for whatever reason, if you really truly believe that you're lacking the skills, obviously there are lots of free sources online. I think Harvard X has a good resource pool of different classes that they offer for free. There are many different resources online to actually educate in whatever that topic or subject is. Then if you have done that and you're still feeling that you're lacking confidence, but you really want to apply, I would say exactly, again, as Mita said, we're all sort of learning things along the way. And if it is a brand new role and you're trying to break in, really, you have to apply and just go for it. Make sure that you are, again, getting answers and asking questions to advisors and mentors on how to best position yourself for this specific role. And ask honest feedback. So if you apply for a role and you get denied, ask, what is it that I could improve on? Was it something about my CV? Was it something about the interview? Everything is a learning process and it's a stepping stone to get where you need to be. I mean, one example was when I went into international relations and moved to DC and thought I was going to be an ambassador. And then in the middle of it realized, because one of my backgrounds is social sciences. So in the middle of it, I realized, geez, like there's 100,000 credentials that I need just to do good in the world and just to be able to have an impact. And it was extremely discouraging because I really just so badly just wanted to give back to the community. And in my mind, it was, why not? Why wouldn't they hire me? But then ultimately realized that I actually went and sought out a mentor. Within 30 minutes, asked 100 questions and realized through that mentor that it actually was not the best fit for me with my skill set. And then I ended up getting back into private equity and venture capital and turned down a job that allowed me to go to Africa and work within the Peace Corps actually at the time. This was many years ago. But that's just an example of, don't be discouraged, even though that's easy to say, but everything will ultimately fall in its place through the right path, and you'll put the pieces together. We all want the puzzle to be very clear, but that's part of the journey, which is really figuring it out along the way.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Sorry,
Oh,
Sandy.
go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Add to that on the confidence piece, right? It's a lot of people go through this, and it's not just women, men as well, right? I mean, you have to pump yourself up a little bit, right? To say, hey, I have the skill set to make this happen. And again, I think people will probably have maybe only 80% of the skills, and then 20% they're going to learn anyway. Or maybe they only have 60% of the skills. You're going to learn it on the job as you grow. I think key is to, again, try to situate yourself to meet a mentor or to get some guidance from someone who can help you as you're trying to figure out these new challenges. But it's something we all go through. And quite frankly, I'm kind of going through it right now, where there's a couple of roles. I'm like, am I good enough? Yes, I'm good enough for that role. And I'm going to go for it. And if I don't get it, that's okay, because it's an opportunity for something else, right? And it's a chance for me to sit back and reflect on, okay, what other skill sets would I need? Or perhaps that was in the industry or the job that I actually would have been good for me, because something else is going to be there.
Definitely. And I feel like that's something that I'm kind of working through too, and like different forms of imposter syndrome and like feeling like I'm not qualified to do something. And I feel like it's just about like talking to people and then also just putting in that like effort to either learn something new or like work through it and make it happen, even though it's like easier said than done. But yeah, definitely something I think that everyone works through at some point. And going off of that, so I guess something else that I've kind of been talking about a lot lately and feeling is that, especially with the pandemic and working from home, it's harder than ever to kind of balance like work with our personal lives. And even when I think you're applying or you get your first full-time job or your first time at a new company, it's easy to feel that you have to say yes to everything that's being asked of you. So I guess, when was the first time that you realized in the workplace that no was an answer and that you could turn down or say no to certain things?
Leonie, I think this is a good one to
Yeah, so still learning, but I guess it depends on what stage of my career. So when I was younger, I said yes to everything because I wanted the experience. I wanted to learn. I would take odd jobs. I wouldn't get paid. But I loved it because it gave me an opportunity to network. It gave me an opportunity to figure things out, get my hands dirty. And that really was the hustle that went along with me then being able to be part of founding many, many companies. And now, as I'm more mature in my career, I definitely say no to a lot of opportunities because I'm in that position where I can finally say that. And I would say that the first time I really recognized that my time was really valuable, I think for myself, it might be a little different because I have 6 parents. So managing my time and my resources has always been extremely important to me. So I've been able to say no before, even when I was much younger. Understanding how to prioritize opportunities and to really create the biggest impact in my career that would really drive me and propel me to the milestones and the goals that I want to achieve. I would say probably in my 20s, but as I said, I'm still learning. There's still moments where there are opportunities that I come across where I might not necessarily just say no to, but it is important to be mindful of your time and have a clear path and understand that is everything that you're doing, are you doing it with a purpose and with the intent to reach your ultimate goal? And if you're still figuring that out, then that's okay. Just make sure that that one thing is taking you a little step closer to figuring it out.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think there's going to be a lot of times in your career where you're going to have to learn how to say no. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think you have to really evaluate what does that no really mean? Is it for your mental health? Is it for time that you needed with your family? Is it because it's a project that you're like, I didn't really align myself to? You have to have like what's the true value and the meaning of why you're saying no, right? Because there's plenty of opportunity. When I was younger as well, I did take a lot of opportunities because I was trying to learn and figure these things out. And I wanted to really, of course, excel my career, what I thought it was supposed to be. But I think it's okay to really start to reflect and say, okay, this is not good for my well-being. And that's when you got to really start to like be firm about your no. It's really easy to do a soft no. But so I think it's taken me time. I think I didn't really learn it until my late 20s. And again, I'm probably recycling. I'm again in a place in my career where I have to learn how to say no again. Just because there's just so much opportunity that people need your help and support on. So I think you'll just keep pivoting back to it, but just remember you have to just stay true to yourself and what your goals are.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And health is extremely important, especially during COVID and a time where we're glued to a screen and we really need to escape and take a deep breath and meditate and walk around. It's really important to now of all times put our health first and be mindful of the intent of what we're doing.
Yeah, I heard something like very similar recently, which was like I think everything that you do needs to come back to like your core why or your core values, and that if you're taking on things that, like you were both saying, if they don't align with like your goals or they don't have like a specific purpose, then don't, waste your time doing them, or like you can prioritize other things. So I think it's definitely important for everyone to remember that as they're figuring out career moves and all of that.
And you're testing, right? Every single time you're testing, and you're learning yourself what your guardrails are and what your limits are. And it's okay. And it's okay to start here and then start to narrow it down to like, I know exactly what my guardrails are.
Definitely. And our next question is, so I guess like kind of relates to everything we've spoken about, but what are your thoughts on how society defines success, especially for women? And how can we each work to reframe what like personal and professional success looks like for us? Mita, would you like to start?
I can start. I think the definition of a success is really very much based on the individual. I think you can't take what you think society says and what's successful for your peers and successful for your friends and say, that's what success is for me. You have to really internalize what success is. I would say from a personal, as a woman, I don't fall into any of the success criteria of perhaps what society's put out there. I'm not married, I don't have children, I don't own a home, but I have a really successful, fulfilling life with my partner, and we've built this great thing. It doesn't fit into anyone's norm, but that's okay because that's what works for me. The same as career. I think you have to take little bites of what you think success is. To some people, it could be reaching a certain title. To some people, it's the amount of money that they make. Some people, it's starting multiple companies or having influence or whatever. I think you have to really decide what it is for you. For me, it's balance. I like having a great career, but I love to come home and cook, and I love to go for a walk, and I like to meet my girlfriends and go for a hike and have brunch and drink champagne and all of those things. And I think you have to really be true to understanding what your success is, and you cannot keep comparing yourselves to other people, because that will really, really just kind of deflate that balloon so quickly. So just stay true to yourself and what you think is what your values are, and what you, it's great to have mentors and to kind of like learn from them, but take what those things are and tailor it to what success means to you.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Leonie?
Yeah, so absolutely, it's very subjective. To me, success, as in addition to having 6 parents, I also have 7 siblings. So for me, success was finding balance and being able to be in a position where I could maximize my time and my resources. And in order to do so, I had to really think and strategize about how I could create balance between my personal and professional life, because I did not want to spend time working on anything that didn't maximize and really catapult both and sort of merge them into one. Not saying that that's how it needs to be. That's just what I felt I wanted to do and how I could really manage my time the most. And but yeah, my definition of success now is really just honestly, I would say do what makes you happy, and that will change. Your definition of happiness will evolve as you evolve.
Yeah.
And as long as you are, I would like to say is I always try to think of being net positive. So not just being neutral, but really giving back more and trying to bring out more than what we're taking. And if there's any way that we could maximize the return on everything that we do, from having a conversation, just really being mindful about how we're living, that is my definition of success for myself. But again, it's subjective. But I don't even know if success, the word success, should even be a milestone that we strive for. Those milestones can be monthly goals that we set, or by yearly goals. It could really just be getting through the day and being the best at what you're trying to do.
Yes. Successful could be getting out of my pajamas tomorrow.
Right.
Maybe today.
Yeah, that's so reassuring to hear. I feel like that's, like, personally, I think something that I've always struggled with is like comparing myself to others, whether that's like in work or at school. And I think it's so easy with like social media, and you're constantly seeing what other people are doing, whether you're like in the office or online. So yeah, I think it's still working on finding, what success means to me. But are there any like tangible things that have helped you kind of, like, I guess, like like create your own definition of success, and kind of limit like the comparison? Like, do you have any tangible advice for someone who's like still trying to figure out how to best do that?
I mean, again, I feel like the overarching theme of all of this is we're going to all go into cycles, and we're going to have to kind of train ourselves back into, all of this advice that we're talking about. I personally, for me, I get a little stressed out, and my partner has to, and my friends come, I rely on them and my network to say, hey, here's kind of where I'm spiraling a little bit. Could we have a conversation? Could we talk about it? Could we, can you help me kind of define some milestones that will get me there? I think it's really good to talk about things. I think a lot of times, like, I'll be scrolling through LinkedIn or whatever it is, right? I'm like, oh my God, this person got promoted, that person, and you have to like take that out, and you have to be able to talk about what you're feeling. And then how do you go and reach your goals? So I think having open communication is super, super important. Don't just keep internalizing things, like really go out there and seek some advice. I think Leonie said that there's a lot of great resources out there that we can leverage, between, from books to TED Talks to whatever it is that can help us kind of parse through what we need to know. But again, for me, it's communication.
Thank you. Yeah, Leonie, is there anything you'd like to add as well?
Yeah, I'll say it's easy to compare ourselves to others because, especially in a world where we live in such a incredibly vast connected community through digital media, social media, every type of platform that currently exists. And we also live, well, depending on what part of the world you live in, but definitely in the United States, we live in a world where we sort of thrive off validation. And I think we constantly are having to validate what we do in our jobs, maybe at home, if we're trying to achieve the next, if we want to get accepted to rent an apartment or whatever it is, we're having someone that is there validating how good we are, what we're measuring us against something. And because of that, I believe, sort of have this trained within us to make some type of comparison to somebody else when we see that what they are doing is what we might strive to achieve. So some of the tactics that have helped me along the way is really meditation, to be quite honest, and breath work. If I notice myself, even now I'm in a place where I'm raising, and it is a long journey, and I'm part of multiple communities of 200 plus other women, and we're constantly sharing stories, and we're all trying to be, we are all very excited for each other. Those stories, I think what helps really not make that comparison or feel down about somebody else's success is to have that compassion and understand that we're all on very different journeys, and to just also recognize the journey that you've been on, and that understand that your story is very different from anybody else's, and appreciate that that is your story. And if you feel any type of anxiety, breath work definitely helps me. Meditation, eating healthy, going for a walk, speaking to your friends, listening to great music, taking a break. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing.
I mean, I think you're
Oh, yeah.
on mute.
Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
was on mute. I love what you just said. I mean, we're all on our own journey, right? And I think that you just said it so beautifully. Yeah.
Also, one quick housekeeping thing. So I have a few more questions for the panelists, but we'll start taking questions from the audience in a couple minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them shortly. But another question that we had was that there are so many barriers of entry to the job market and to the workforce, whether that's like unpaid internships or even internships that pay, such a minimal salary that you can't afford to relocate, like certain education or qualification requirements. So what advice do you have for someone who's up against some of these hurdles that prevent access to opportunities? Leonie, would you like to start?
Yeah, access is the key that's a word that you're going to be faced against for the entirety of your career. I will say that, even life. Access to opportunity is something that is scarce and it doesn't come by easily. So I think if I could have told myself something, that might be one question. It would probably be when I was younger that it doesn't matter how old I am, there will always be challenges to have access. I'm definitely facing the same. If any of you ever choose to go down the route of starting your own fund, I'll tell you that funders receiving funding in a world where 97% of all capital is controlled by non-BIPOC men is a tough needle to push. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to be in a place in the near future where access will just be readily available. It's going to be a constant push, and we just have to remind ourselves that we're doing it not just for ourselves, but for everyone that looks like us, that is wanting to do the same thing as us. And yeah, I don't know if there's any secrets to gaining access other than just networking and trying your hardest and sharing your story, being honest and really just partnering. I think partnerships and forming relationships will really help speed up, I think, the process of getting from A to B. We can't do any of it alone. And unfortunately, what I'm finding out and on the other side of the spectrum from being on the funding side is that it really is who you know. Sometimes, I hate to say that, but I mean, it depends on what career path you're going down.
Yeah. Again, I think pivoting is okay. And sometimes you have to pivot to take a role that perhaps isn't paying you enough to be able to learn and get your foot in the door. But you don't settle for that, right? You're going to prove yourself and you say, hey, I would like to be reevaluated after 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, so that you can now really set the stage and the path that you're looking for at whatever opportunity it is. I mean, for example, for me, I think it was like 2007 or 2008, was looking for a new role, and it was tough. The economy was, again, tough. And I ended up going back to school and taking an internship because I wanted to switch out of one field, go into something else. And I, of course, took a massive pay cut, but it was worth it in the end because I got the internship, I learned so much, and then I got a full-time role. And so sometimes you do have to take maybe a step backward, but it might propel you 3 steps forward, right? And so I think you have to think about what the trade-offs could be, and how does that hit your long-term goals and plans. So it's okay to pivot as long as it fits kind of your lifestyle and your goals and whatnot, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely. And speaking of I guess there are some processes or some moments in everyone's career that can be especially intimidating. And I know that a couple that a lot of people have trouble with are, negotiating salaries or asking for a raise or promotion. Do you have any advice when it comes to building confidence or creating a plan before any of those moments? And do you have any thoughts on how approaching a salary negotiation or asking for promotion changes at the start of your career versus maybe 5 or 10 years into your career, if at all?
So I'll just share some advice that I've been given, and it's constantly reminded to me. The worst thing they can say is no, which is no different than the situation you're already in. So you have to go and ask, right? And I think what really helps is to build your story, right? Here were all of my success factors. Here are the things that I was very successful at, either improving or changing or driving or creating, whatever it is. But make sure that you've got your bullet list, right? And you're very clear with your points, and you're very clear with, here's what I think the next step is for me. Because a lot of times your manager or whoever is, yes, they're thinking about you, but they're also thinking about 100 other things, and they're thinking about their own promotion and whatnot. And so if you can arm them with what they need to know to say, okay, yes, you know what, you deserve this promotion, that's better. They're never going to be inside your head. And as much as we want them to be thinking about your career all the time, they're most likely not going to be. So you're going to have to be the one to do all the legwork.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I know. I feel like it's often hard. And I've also heard people say, wait for the company to make an offer first rather than setting your own value at a certain rate and then working on negotiating. Do you have any advice on that? Or Leonie, is there anything else that you would like to add as well?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a one size fits all mode of asking. I think it's subjective to the individual, and so I'm not going to put on my tactics. Absolutely not. For me, I always realized I like pushing the boundaries. I like, if I sense that I'm maybe fearful or feeling anxious about something, I just go bulldoze right through it. It's almost like when you're about to have your first kiss and you're kind of anxious and you don't know what's gonna happen, but then afterwards it's super easy and you just, get used, or at first anything really, right? I think you just have to do it, and then you experience what it's like to ask and to ask for what you deserve, and to stand and to expect someone meet you where you are. That's really what it is. I mean, you deserve the promotion, and don't be afraid to ask. Just be, what Mita said, I think also it's great to have that bullet list and know exactly what your worth is, and understand what you bring to the table, what you're bringing to the table for a specific role. Also, I think that list could help in the confidence section. So if you put together a list that you have on your phone, and maybe put together the top 5 most challenging and difficult things you've ever experienced in your life, whether it's work related or personal, always go back to that list and just think of how much of a boss you are. And just remember, this is everything that you've overcome. Asking for a promotion is the least, like, you can get through it. You can get through it, and you're deserving. Just remember that.
Absolutely. And I think, as you're doing your salary negotiations, there's so many tools out there, right? To say, hey, here's the range of salary based on experience. And I think if you know that, again, you're absolutely right. It's all individual preference, right? Depending on what your style is. And, you like to probably push the boundaries more. I'm probably a little bit more conservative and working more towards like, how do I push the boundaries a little bit more? But it really is kind of subjective to what you want and what you need. But also knowing that you have to leverage the tools. Like, you can't say, hey, I want 30K above this salary if you already know that the range is, you're probably towards the higher range, right? But I think every job that you go out, they want you to negotiate. They're already starting with a salary that expecting that you're going to negotiate. Women just don't do it enough. So I think you have to absolutely go in knowing that there is a place for negotiation, but just do your homework on how much you can push that envelope.
Right. And even using those tools, I mean, like Glassdoor, I think, is one where you can check and see the different salary ranges. I've always been an independent, so I've been able to set my own salary often, but of course it was within parameters. But yeah, that's definitely a great tool. And Mita, would you say, is there a specific amount that one should shoot over if you know they're going to negotiate down?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I wouldn't say, I would say maybe there's like a few percentages you could shoot for, right? Again, though, if you think you're on the lower end of the spectrum and your skill set says, hey, you're paying me 25% lower than market, you ask for that, right? But I think you can also come up with, maybe it was different for you, but we can reference different roles out there and what other companies are offering. But I think just be careful. You have to know, like, if you're at a startup, don't come in with a salary from a large, Fortune 500 company, and things like that. So I would say, if you feel like you're 10K off, then, ask for that 10K. If you feel like it could be between that range, then, think about what's the range that's going to make you comfortable. And also know that there's room for growth. Because you also want to come into a role knowing that there's room for you to grow and get that next role and that next, promotion and that next salary bump. So
exactly. Yeah.
Make sure that you're part of that bell curve, though.
Right. And I think that's really another great point that you said, which is make sure that you're comfortable and that you're able to live within the means of what you're asking for.
Yeah.
And then also another great point that you bring up is definitely if you're working for a startup. So I think there are realms of different spectrums of what that salary range could look like. And in the world of startups, it's very different, but there are also trade-offs that you get. So
absolutely. The benefits and the stock options and, all of those things. So look at it as a holistic package.
Exactly. And you have to really think of that package, what is most important to you and what are you willing to negotiate more of and less of, and do you want the benefits or do you want this? And so everything is a negotiation in life, really.
Absolutely.
That's super helpful. I think I'm definitely going to apply that. And I'm also, after this, like, definitely going to make the list in my notes app of all the things that I'm like proud of and just to look back on when things get tough. But I guess that's like the perfect segue to our last question, which is, I know we've touched on a lot of ways that, we can help recognize our worth and know our worth throughout different stages of our career journeys. But are there like any advice you have on that, or any other tangible ways that, we could just help recognize like how valuable we are and what we bring to the table over the course of our careers?
I don't know. I just liked how you said we're all badasses. You have to know and recognize your worth, because I mean, that's what we're here for, right? We're here as a collective group to kind of lift each other up and to support each other. And I think having your tribe, right, knowing who your people are who are going to support you and lift you up is super important. And just know that if you're bringing it every day is going to be different. And some days you might see the successes, and some days you have to really look at what the small wins are and be like, that was success too. And every little point counts, and it counts to the bigger picture. And just always think like, hey, let me reflect, right? What did I do in the last 5 years? What did I do in the last 2 years? And just remember that journey, you're going to keep looking back as you look forward, right? To learn from how you already grew. And so just keep letting yourself know you can do it, and count on your tribe is kind of how I do it.
Thank you. Leonie?
Yeah, no, I definitely second that. I agree with all of it. I think your friends, just surrounding yourself with people who can remind you of what your worth is. I think knowing your worth, I definitely struggled with that at the beginning of my career, understanding how to even measure what I should get paid, and not even knowing that I could ask for equity for startups. I mean, I've worked with startups my whole career, and I was given some bad advice, or not even, the lack of, where now I look back and think, man, I wish I had known that 17 years ago or so. But yeah, I think it's something that we figure out along the way through our own struggles, and that's how we really know our worth and know where we stand, by sometimes unfortunately forgetting that, and then we're reminded of, oh wait, this is what I'm worth, and this is how I can be confident and gain confidence.
Definitely. And thank you both so much for your time and the incredible advice. I saw so many people taking notes throughout the panel, so I know all your advice is so helpful. And yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap up the panel. And I'll pass it back on to Kylie. But thank you so much again for your time and feedback. It was amazing.
Thank you. And by the way, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, please do. I'm happy to jump on a call or whatnot. So we're in this together.
I'll put both your LinkedIns in the chat afterwards.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was so good. I also love the chat. I was like reading it on the side. We've got people applying to jobs during the talk. So many. I love the what would Chad do? That is going to be super glued to my synapse from here on out, because that's hilarious. So true. Yeah, so good. This is such a good group. So before we jump into our next conversation, I do want to highlight our other two swag sponsors. So the first one is Jillian Barrett, and she owns a company called Love Your Reflection. And this is actually a perfect segue to the last comment in the chat, which was about taking an expo marker and writing on your mirrors. So Jill is a full-time college student, and she's the owner of Love Your Reflection. So her business is focused on spreading positivity and love through empowering mirror decals. In May 2020, she saw the need for some light in the darkness of COVID-19, and she created Love Your Reflection, not only to spread positivity, but also to encourage people to be themselves. Jill says, as a young Black female small business owner, I work to create a space and platform where everyone feels welcome, heard, loved, and accepted. which I just think is so sweet. So yeah, some of you will have gotten her mirror decals in the mail. You'll see them. They're they say never settle. They're not stickers. So make sure you do go to her website. You will have gotten a little note that says how to do that, and how to apply them. I have one on my mirror right now that says be kind, which is just a good reminder every day to, be kind to yourself and to others. And it's just a great way to start the day. Our next swag sponsor is a woman named Callie Goodwin. So Callie is the founder of Sparks of Joy Co., which is a greeting card company focused on spreading more joy in the world through handwritten cards. Callie also started her business in the midst of quarantine, when she realized just how impactful a simple handwritten card could be. Each of her postcards and flat cards come pre-stamped to help eliminate barriers between thinking of sending a card, which I know we all do, and actually getting it in the mail. So just to reiterate, I'm so thankful for all of these sponsors. I really do hope you follow them on Instagram. You can find all of their Instagrams in your workbook. And one thing that Sandy and I wanted to be sure of with this event is any of the sponsors, any of the speakers, like we truly love them. And we know they are incredible people. So I hope some of you will take up, what Mita said and connect with her on LinkedIn, connect with Leonie, as well as Michaela and Tiffany, who we're going to hear from next. So before we do that, I just want everyone to take a breath, maybe, stretch a little bit, because we're going into another talk that's going to be great. And I know we just got a lot of information. So feel free to shake it off. And yeah, here we go. So now we're going to hear from Michaela Kiner and Tiffany Waddell Tate. So Michaela is a born and raised Seattleite who spent 15 years in HR leadership roles at local companies, including, but not limited to, Microsoft, Starbucks, Amazon, PopCap Games, and Redmond. In 2015, she founded Reverb, which is also where I work, and we provide innovative HR services for startups and growing companies. Michaela also serves on the board of Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking, also called BEST. She is passionate about Seattle startups, inclusive culture, coaching high potential leaders, and women in tech. And she's also the author of Female Firebrands, which some of you will be getting that copy in the mail. I also wanted to just make a connection here that I met Michaela through a breadcrumb trail of networking because I graduated from my master's program. I did not know what I was doing. I was incredibly overwhelmed and I just started talking to people, and eventually it led me to Michaela, which led me here to all of you. So full circle moment. Our next speaker is Tiffany. So Tiffany Waddell Tate is the CEO and founder of Career Maven Consulting, where she helps individuals and companies reimagine the future of work through coaching, digital education, and training and development for organizations and teams. Tiffany is a master in coaching professionals to learn, lead, and grow at work while being true to their authentic selves and building their personal brand. So I'm very excited to hear from these two incredible women. And without further ado, I'll open it up to Michaela.
Thank you so much. And I have to ask before we jump in, just remind me exactly how much time we have because we have so much to say.
Yes, good question. I love that. So we have till 4 on everyone's calendars. I'm going to stay on, Sandy and I are going to stay on a little bit after if anyone just wants to chat, wants to connect, anything like that. But yes, till 4 technically.
Awesome. So we'll keep it to about 45 minutes because I want to make sure there's time for some questions and networking at the end. I will also say, just in terms of the way that I met Kylie, which is the way that I have been fortunate to meet so many people, I keep trying to think of a good way in my mind to say, like, what is the opposite of the old boys network? Because there is this, like, it's the new women's network of how we all meet each other and get to connect. So if anyone finds a pithier way to say that, please share, because it really is an important thing that's happening. Well, I'm so excited to be here with Tiffany. Tiffany and I have met and spoken a handful of times prior to today, and she just has so much that is amazing to share about her career journey and how that can apply to your career journey. I want to start with this. So when we were talking about our own career paths, both Tiffany and I had very eclectic paths. I think it's fair to say neither of us had a specific career plan. And Tiffany, you described yours as a tumbleweed career journey. So could you say more about that?
Absolutely. I'm so pumped to be here and just talk about this. I think, I remember what it was like to be a college student and a new grad, and people ask you, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What are you doing with that major? And so when I say tumbleweed, I quite literally mean I've had so many seemingly random jobs, in undergrad. I went to Wake Forest undergrad and I double majored in psychology and theater. And for a brief time, I thought, oh, I want to go to graduate school and be a stage director. Like I was a true theater kid for a solid year in college. And it was really random. I didn't do theater before college, but I fell in love with it. I found my voice, behind the stage. I really am not an actor, but I really just loved it. And I found art to be such an incredible space for me at that time in my life. But when I graduated, I applied to several programs, and like many sort of terminal degrees, even in the art world, most people who enter those programs are out of school. They've been out of school for a while. They've been working artists. They've done a lot of things. So I was rejected from all of the programs I applied to. And after that, after I sort of picked my face up off the ground and stopped crying, I started a master's program at my college part-time. And I had a couple of odd jobs. I think I was substitute teaching and working in a local restaurant in my city. And someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I think, you're doing this graduate assistantship in student development. You've been very involved as a student leader. We are opening an advising center at the college, and I think you would be great. Students really need you. And I was like, ooh, I don't know. I mean, this isn't really, what I thought I wanted to do. And I applied for that role. I started on the first day that the office opened, and did that for about 2.5 years. And I found myself really loving the program development. I loved the coaching. I loved the advising. I didn't love some of the challenges that undergraduates face sort of personally. It was hard to leave it at work. So a couple of years in, someone else tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, you've been doing a lot of work with career services. You should apply for this role. And I was like, okay, cool. And I did. And I transitioned to that department at the university, and quite literally found my place. So I still had that piece where I was working with students and really helping them think about what's next. As a liberal arts student, especially, how can you make sense of something that doesn't seem linear or doesn't seem to be sort of a direct path into a particular career? And so I did that work in our center at a really interesting time. It was getting a lot of sort of national fanfare in the college world because our center had been sort of blown up and heavily resourced. So I got a lot of training during that time and shored up my career coaching skills and landed a few certifications. And then I thought, I've grown up here. I went to college here. I started my career here. Let's leave. And I found another position at another liberal arts institution focused on leading their professional development, curriculum design, still helping students, but also helping other professionals learn how to do this work well and really scale the engagement on campus. So after that, for about 4 years, I hung my shingle out and launched my company. So when I say tumbleweed, like, I didn't have designs on working in higher education, but I've done that for the last little over 10 years. And it's been an awesome journey, as well as other things sort of outside of that 9-to-5 time that have helped me learn a lot more about learning and development, coaching, and training.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. And by the way, just because neither Tiffany nor I had a plan, we're not saying don't have a plan. We're just saying it's okay if you don't have a plan. And there is some benefit in career planning. I'll just share my, early, probably before I ended up getting into sort of the field of HR. So one summer in college, I worked at a freak show in Coney Island. That's a different story for a later time. And then I worked for a family while I was in school, and they already had a full-time nanny. They had 2 kids, and I would babysit weekends and evenings when the nanny was not nannying. And then once a week, I did all of their grocery shopping and I prepared them a meal. So that tells you a lot about them. But the father was an attorney. And as I was finishing college, and I was liberal arts, I was design your own major. I think my parents wanted to disown me. I was like writing, literature, education. Then I did nonprofit internships, and that wasn't really for me. And he offered me a paralegal job. in his whatever New York office. And both of my parents are attorneys. I really wanted to stay as far away from that conservative office environment as possible. And I happened to be working in a startup coffee company while I was in school. And so instead of taking the prestigious paralegal job, I took the managing a cafe manager job, which then my parents wanted to disown me again, because now they had to say their college graduate daughter was like working in a coffee shop. But that is, by the way, that was an expanding business that ended up growing into 30 stores across 3 states. And quickly I had a chance to move up and do all of the hiring and training, which was really how I fell into HR, even though I was kind of predisposed because my folks do employment law. So yeah, those are the tumbleweed stories. Tiffany, you talk about something called career design, and I wonder first if you could define career design for us, and then talk about some of the steps in that process and how you can pursue it without getting overwhelmed.
Sure. So for me, career design is quite literally the difference between your career happening to you and you happening to it. So it's like this mindset that lives at the intersection of control freak and flexibility, right? So you can't actually control anything in life as much as we might think we can, myself included. And you don't want to sort of intentionally be tumbleweeding, even though that is a term I use for my own career story. I think you do want to be somewhere in the middle. So career design for me really is thinking about what are your values. I know there's a value sort in the guidebook that the participants have today, but getting really clear on what your values are, getting really clear on what it is you want or need to learn. And the answers to those questions can change at different sort of stops across your life. So right after college or right after your first job, you may take a pause and take a moment to think a little bit about, well, what do I care about right now? Or what did I not like in that internship or that full-time experience? And what did I like? And what do I want to have more of? And so it's sort of building the scaffolding of your career, not based on a particular job function or a job type. It's okay if you do know that you want to go into employment law, for example, and that has a very clear and linear path. But if you don't know the exact thing that you want to do, or if the exact thing that you thought you wanted to do doesn't make you happy or you don't feel fulfilled, then thinking about big questions as kind of the foundation for what's next, like whatever your best next step is what I mean when I say career design. So you're designing it as you go and answering those questions and sort of taking stock on, all right, I've learned a lot about this technology tool. That's really great. I've mastered it. I now want to learn a little bit more about client engagement or recruiting. How can I do that either where I sit or in another space? And as you pick up those skills and sort of expand your toolkit, you can make a lot more, you can use those answers as filters for making decisions about opportunities or creating opportunities as well.
Yeah, I love that description. And I think it's important for people to understand that, especially as adults and professionals, our career journey it's not linear. And especially when we make changes, there's a really great book by a woman named Herminia Ibarra about really radical career transformations. Like the one I always remember is the guy who went from being a stockbroker to making wine in the Alps with monks, or, anyway, it was something very dramatic. But another who thought, he thought his dream was to become a scuba instructor. And he went and did that for 3 weeks and was like, yeah, that was kind of fun, but it would be super boring. Like, I'm not going to uproot my whole life to become a scuba instructor, even though it sounded very glamorous. And so finding those ways to kind of explore and iterate and try out new things. And I would say there are 2 times I can remember personally doing this early in my career. So I spent basically my first 7 years in my career was at Microsoft. And after a couple of years in recruiting, I actually joined up with one of my clients who ran a different part of the organization in operations. And I took this job that I thought was going to be I thought I was going to learn project management skills. And he was really great and took a bet on me. I ended up managing bills of materials, which if anyone knows what that is just like really big spreadsheets that you have to stare at all day long. And I ended up calling it the job with no human contact. And after 2 months, I was like, thank you so much for this job. And like, I have to get out of here because I'm driving to work and I'm hoping to get into a fender bender. So I don't actually have to come and do this, like stare at these spreadsheets all day. And he was really nice, but he was kind of annoyed, like, well, I took this bet on you. And I was like, I know. And he was like, well, I can't let you go right now. So I was in that job for 9 months with the bills and materials. And finally, 9 months later, he came up and said, what do I have to do? I was like, you have to let me go back into HR. And it had really validated for me why I like HR and why I do what I do. Like, I really like that interactive job with a lot of human contact, which not everyone does, but it was for me. The one other story that I can share from my time at Microsoft was I had been offered a promotion under my same boss, and I was just trying to, figure out if that was the right job for me. And I was lucky to have a mentor. And I went to my mentor, Dave Gartenberg, who's amazing, and I still consider a mentor. And Dave was great. He was like, first of all, if you're looking, look broadly. Like, don't just evaluate this one job that kind of landed in front of you. Think about other internal jobs, maybe think about external jobs. And Dave taught me this thing that I have used ever since. And I use this with my coaching clients and especially people in career transition, which is think of all of the job criteria that you can. Like, it could be, there's no commute right now, but commute, the kind of boss I want to have, the kind of culture, the environment, the kind of skills I want to use, the compensation, everything you can think of. Put it on a list and then kind of force yourself to objectively rank every single opportunity that you're looking at. When I did that for the job I was being offered, that job exceeded my expectations. Like, it had everything plus. And so it became a no-brainer, right, to go and take that job. But sometimes we forget to do that. And there's like, we're excited, or it's an emotional thing, or we're like, I'm looking for a job, there's this job in front of me. But if you force yourself to think objectively and do that ranking, you're actually going to recognize either, gosh, this job only has, 30% of what I'm looking for. Well, maybe you do really need to take that job, but at least you can go into it with intentionality and with your eyes open. So those are my two kind of job search recommendations. There's something that Mita touched on earlier, which is you want to go into a job where there's growth and advancement opportunity. We also talked about this horrible statistic where women, we think we have to be completely overqualified before we even apply for a job. I had a boss, the way he said this was every candidate is suboptimal, meaning he meant it in a nice way. Like, that person's never going to fulfill 100% of the job description. And frankly, if they do, they'll be bored. So that was his philosophy. But what I'd love to hear from you, Tiffany, is when you're a candidate, how do you know when to apply? Like, I know we saw a lot of like, what's the worst that can happen? Someone will say no. But how do you really know if this might be a good opportunity for you, even if you don't meet every single qualification?
Yeah, so I think that's a big question. I know there's a stat rolling around, and someone said in the last session, what would Chad do? And we say, women especially need to apply. Doesn't matter if you have at least 10% of the skills listed, shoot your shot. You don't know what will happen. You don't know what the candidate pool is. In general, I agree with that. I think tactically, though, you want to make sure that you're being really strategic in where you are kind of casting your resume off. So I usually recommend that clients look at the job description and really unpack, like, what are the core skills and responsibilities? Like, what are the things that this person, either they've listed, need to be able to do that you might have done in another context. So like, for example, if it's a job where you have an account management function and you have to be really good flipping from some type of CRM platform to on the phone or on Zoom, I guess now with people, have you done that type of work elsewhere? Like, are you good with tech? Are you really involved in your community? You can probably have a conversation, so you could parlay that experience to be relevant. If the job description has things listed under preferred and you feel a little anxious about that list, preferred is not mandatory. So I think if you can hit a couple of the things on that list and in the core sort of body of the job description or the requisition, then I say go for it. You just really have to understand the difference between what's required and what's preferred. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't take that much effort to apply, like if you're retooling your resume slightly, you don't lose much. And I've been on hiring committees with people that you're like, wow, they have everything. I mean, we really are surprised, we're shocked. We're amazed. They don't fit sort of the profile that we would have anticipated for this role, but they fit this role. And so I think, for folks who are a little unsure, those are a couple tactical things you can do. I also recommend thinking about LinkedIn as a place where you can mine data. So search that job description and see what types of backgrounds other people who do that work have, and you might be pleasantly surprised at what you see. As a way to sort of affirm you, to see what types of people and what types of career journeys they've had before they've gotten to that particular role or function.
Yeah, that's really great advice. The only thing I would add is you don't know what's going on inside of that company. And for those who have been inside of companies, many things go on inside of companies. So you don't know if, hey, maybe for someone with fewer qualifications, they could bring down the level or salary a little bit and create a growth opportunity. Sometimes for someone more senior, right, they can scale up the job in terms of the scope and complexity to accommodate that person. Or maybe they're filling that job, but they have this other job opening next week that you didn't even see, and you're the perfect candidate. And so I really like what Tiffany said, which is if it's not like an extreme effort for you to completely redo your resume, then I just agree there's no harm, and you don't know, right, what opportunities you may miss by not applying. Mm-hmm. So I want to shift gears here from this sort of like transactional and job search. And I want to talk about values and non-negotiables. This is so important because in my experience in human resources, especially when senior people leave organizations, it's very often due to a values mismatch. It's not about job performance. It's not about job descriptions. It's about there's something in the culture that doesn't feel right. There's some way, that people are behaving or getting work done that just kind of doesn't align with people. So Tiffany, in creating Career Maven, obviously you've gotten to create your own type of work experience and environment where you can really be true to your values. And I'd love if you could share how you've done that, and then also help people when they're candidates, how can they make sure that they're finding that fit that's right for them?
Yeah. Gosh, that's such a good question. So at Career Maven, I spend a lot of time talking about work, future of work, all things work. We spend so much time at work, right? Far more time sort of in a traditional work context than we do with our families in some ways, save this last year's experience. But it's really important. There are some things that are really important to me in life that I've also woven into the fabric or ethos of my company. So things like pay equity are really important to me. So I don't do unpaid internships. It's not something that I get it. I've done unpaid internships. I just don't feel great about onboarding people and not paying them for their work. And so that's a big one for me. It impacts how I hire and who I hire. And when I think about sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's also very important to me, even though, I'm a very lean team right now. But when I'm looking at contractors or folks to work with me on any projects or ongoing commitments, it's really important to me that they also espouse those values and that it's clear in their company outlay or the work that they do or the sort of things that they've been sponsored by, right? Like if you are working for some, I don't know, I'm not even going to name it, but some like really problematic, hate-filled publication, I'm probably not going to work with you because that's not going to work. And so essentially my sort of core values as a human dovetail into my company values, and it impacts what I say yes to. It impacts the content that I produce and create on the internet. It impacts the people that I hire and also how I support and amplify others. So even if I don't have the opportunity to hire you, I would love to promote your work if it is aligned, right? Because it's still sort of part of my brand. For people who are looking at values and whether or not a place is a great place for them to step into as a new hire, or maybe it's a place that you are trying to step away from and you're trying to figure out how or why. I think questions around, so going back to that value sort, I feel like I'm going to go back to that a lot. but you have to be really clear on what your own non-negotiables are. And there is a difference between, I don't really like that, and a non-negotiable, right? There are a lot of things I don't necessarily care for, but in the context of someone else's organization or company, I'm not really driving all of the sort of values base of that place or that space. So if you think of companies as institutions, there are going to be aspects of companies that you just don't like. Maybe you're really into sustainability. Let me get specific. And you don't like that they are a heavy paper organization. That may or may not be something that makes you run for the hills, but it's something you might take note of. It may be something that you decide to speak up about, but it's not something that's going to make or break your choice to work there. On the other hand, you might have a non-negotiable around inclusion. And perhaps you notice some trends in what their hiring or their promotion pathing looks like internally. And you have the opportunity to ask for data or just ask questions around, what does the recruitment process look like? Where do you post these jobs? How are these decisions made? How are people trained up on facilitating interview processes, for example? And maybe what you see or what you hear does not align with what your values are, and you don't want to participate or be a part of that culture. That might be time to make a decision. So for people who are trying to figure it out, does a company align with those values, with your values? I think asking really good questions around what the person that you'll be reporting to's leadership style is, what their philosophy on talent development or professional development looks like, how they've responded to things like a global pandemic to create community and, among people working virtually, like questions around how that person works, how they communicate, how they want people to communicate with them. And the reason I say the person you're reporting to is you are going to spend a lot more time with that person, and that person has their thumb on your progress. And I think a lot of times we think about companies as like, oh my gosh, they have to stand for everything I believe in. But companies, unless they're a company of like 5 people, think of them like small cities. There might be areas in that organization that don't align with your values. You may never know that because the area where you are is great, because the people in your area are great. So I think it's a little nuanced. That's kind of a windy way to answer your question, Michaela, I think, but just asking really good questions about how they source, how they promote, how they identify people who are rock stars, how they support people when they're having tough times, what happens, like how do you celebrate wins? Things like that can really be a really great way to figure out what matters to people, what they care about or what they don't care about. And in those answers, I think you can find a lot of clues as to what people value in that particular organization in a very different way than reading a website might indicate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, those are really great suggestions. I love how you distinguished between a non-negotiable and like a preference. It made me think, I spent 6 years at Amazon, and they're much better at this now, but during that time, there were no matching gifts of any kind. And I had come from Microsoft they used to match up to 20,000. I don't know what they do now, but, from a place where giving was really core to who they were. And it was something like I felt bad about that as an Amazon employee, but yet, again, it was a strong preference, but it wasn't something that was mandatory versus, I worked in a culture that was very disrespectful. And I was like, life is too short. Like, I don't have time for, disrespect and rudeness at work. So I had to move on. I love the questions that you were sharing and recommending. And there's some, I've had more and more people when they're looking to make job changes, and they're asking, like, what are some appropriate questions that can get at a company's strategy around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging? And in particular, is it legitimate? Is it authentic? Or is it just posturing, I guess? So are there 1 or 2 questions you think that can help people really get below the surface on that?
Yeah, so that's can be a slippery one, depending on sort of what your function might be. I think it can be, but I think asking questions like, I call these 2-for-1s. So identifying something on their website, whether it's a statement they've put out or a program that they've done, or like, even if you can find an initiative, like if you can Google them in the news and see like, oh, they, made this philanthropic gift to this nonprofit, whatever it is, finding something, a nugget to say, hey, I noticed that that the company contributed to X organization last year in response to, all of the civil unrest. I was deeply impressed by that. I'm curious to know, what does the broader equity and inclusion strategy look like within the organization to support employees from marginalized backgrounds? And what that does is it creates a little bit of safety because you're like, hey, cool job there. You did that cool thing over there. That's great. And also, I have a really big question. So you're not sort of driving in immediately to ask what's the strategy, especially if it's out of the scope of what your work is, even though we all know inclusion work is everybody's work, but some organizations don't understand that. So I think it's important to kind of sort of tease it out. I think another really good question, I'm sort of thinking through, I think asking questions like, wow, I've read a lot in the news lately about how women are being pulled out of the workforce because of the tension between a pandemic and caregiving responsibilities, up or down. I'm curious to know what types of things your company has done to speak to this gap, right? Like, so you're acknowledging that there is a challenge for a particular segment of their staff or human capital, and you're asking what types of things have you done or created to speak to that. So that's a very specific and narrow way to, or sort of sideways way to ask, but it's not, tell me your whole DEI strategy, which is of course another question you could ask.
Yeah, I love these questions. I love how you're sort of grounding it in a fact or a data point, and that makes it comfortable somehow, or I don't say inoffensive, like it makes it comfortable for them. I would also, this is my personal view, I mean, I would also say anyone who is uncomfortable or doesn't appreciate those kind of questions, like probably not the greatest place to go and work if these are things that you care about, right? If that is going to be off-putting to someone, that right there is a huge signal about that culture, and maybe not something that you want to be part of.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
Yeah. So we're talking about, being early career, looking for a job in a pandemic. How picky can we be, Tiffany? Like, can we find that job full of meaning and purpose in the company that aligns with our values? Or, how do we know where to make some trade-offs?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I feel like I always say it depends. I think you can be very intentional about the career choices that you make, if you remember the career design idea, but career design to me is that intersection between hyper control and super flexibility. So sometimes I think you can find a job that does speak to all of your values, pays you extremely well, is in the location literally or remotely that you want to be, and it sort of fits with the lifestyle that you want to have. Sometimes you might have to flex a little bit on one of those dimensions so that you have most of what you want. And I think depending on where you are in your career, like if you're just starting out, you may find an opportunity that aligns with all of those dimensions. But I also think it's okay to give yourself a little bit of grace, because you may be sort of quite literally figuring out what your values are. Sometimes we don't know how deeply something matters to us until something happens, right? And I think we've talked about this, Michaela, like before I was a parent, I worked myself. I mean, I'm a recovering workaholic. I actually enjoy working, right? If it's purposeful work, sign me up. But once I became a mom, I kind of, that sort of, turned my world a little bit upside down, mostly in a good way, because I started thinking about time and space very differently. I started thinking about the kind of person that I wanted to be when I came home. And that meant a slight value shift. I still care about the things that I've always cared about, but time and quality of time matter so much more to me now than it did 10 years ago in many ways. And so the type of work environment that I need or would look to enter might look a lot different based on my current life and my current lifestyle and needs. So a lot of words to say, yes, I think you can find a place that fits all of the boxes that you want to check. And also remember that, any slight shift can disrupt it. You could get a new manager in 2 months in, and it may not feel like the best perfect place to be anymore. Or the company may need to make some really challenging financial decisions. And you might sort of not have all of the perks that you got when you were onboarded. So I think you can find the place, but it depends because so many variables are outside of our control, if that makes sense.
I don't know where Michaela went. It might be.
Okay, I wonder why my face is so big.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
It's all good.
Hi.
I'm here for you. I have her. Yeah, we'll just wait for her to hop back on. Maybe Sandhya can keep an eye out for her. But to follow up with that, to go along with what you were just saying, what are some of those signs that maybe it's time to move on?
Whew, yeah, so time to move on. I think obviously if you're in a toxic work environment, you gotta go because it's gonna impact your well-being. It's gonna impact the way you show up in your personal life. It's gonna impact your mental health. I have been there, speaking from experience and also client experience. If there isn't a clear career path or growth path inside of an organization, I think that can often be an indicator that it might be time to go if you are looking for growth or stretching in your work. If you're not, for some reason, right? If you're like, you know what, I'm trying to build a company on the side, I can, speak to that. Then maybe it's okay to coast for a little bit. That's also fine. Then, but for a lot of people, I would imagine folks on this call, if you're not learning and growing anymore, it may be time to go, and or before you exit, lean into having a conversation about advocating for either stretch opportunities or your role to be advanced. If that doesn't work and you're sort of met with, oh, we can't do that right now, or yes, you are great, but that's not going to work, then it's time to go. And then I think I might have already said this, but if you aren't learning anymore, quite literally every job I've ever left, it was because it wasn't save one that was a really toxic work environment. All the other transitions were because I hit the ceiling of learning and there wasn't any place else to go. And I'm, if you are interested in learning and doing more and having an impact in your work, then you're going to feel uncomfortable when you've outsized your role. If you are comfortable with work just sort of being a place that you go, you do things, you're hitting your deliverables, but you don't want to do much more, and you're building a life outside of work, then maybe that works, can work for you. But I think it really just depends on sort of your values again and your needs, right? So, and I'm saying that as someone who's built a company external to working full time in another organization. So the things that I was looking for in my first or second role out of college in terms of training and growth and learning and deep challenge, I still want to be challenged, but I don't want to be burned out. So,
yeah,
that's
absolutely. One of the jobs I left, it was at a school, but it was essentially in childcare. And we were required to work on Christmas Eve, and we were required to work. It was sort of a school that was really a daycare. But I went to talk to my boss and basically asked for a week off around the holidays. And she was like, no, this is part of the job description. Also, you won't get paid better anywhere else than what I'm paying you. And I'm like, you're paying me $17 an hour and I am 22 years old. So you to say that I will not get paid better anywhere else, like that was a sign for me to leave. And so I, like you said, I tried to have that conversation. Her values were very financially driven. And I was like, if that's the reason I'm here, that doesn't sit well with me. We do have a question from the chat. So Kate says that she's at that point where it's time to go, but she stayed because she couldn't find another job during the pandemic. Tiffany, do you believe that having somewhere set up before you go, like kind of having an exit plan, or I guess a re-entry plan. Oh, Michaela's back. Hey, how important do you think that is?
Again, it depends. If the place where you are, if you feel like it's time to go because it is really negatively impacting your health and well-being, and you have the financial support to step away without another opportunity, great. For other people, you may want to build your escape hatch before you jump out of it, or build your landing pad, I guess is the right way to say that, before you jump out of the escape hatch. I believe deeply that a really great place to be in, assuming you're not in a really painful place professionally, it's really great to look for a job while you have a job because you have, you don't know how long it will take to convert when you start the search process. So it's nice to have, money coming in. But if that's not a barrier for you for any reason, then I think it's also okay to take some time away. It really depends on your sort of personal situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michaela's back. I can't tell. Your video looks paused, Michaela, but I think we can hear you. Maybe. Okay, maybe
it's
maybe
the worst when this happens. I see someone's comment about toxic positivity in the chat as well. Or I thought it did. Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, toxic positivity is a whole thing. Like I would like, if I can, Kylie, I'd love to say something about that. I think that this idea that you can only be grateful for the work that you are doing or the job that you have is extremely dangerous, especially for women. I worked for an organization where there was just a lot of like, we should be so grateful that we are able to be here and we should be so grateful. And I'm like, yes, in life, I'm a person of faith or whatever. So yes, I'm grateful in life to be employed, but within the confines of an organization, it's really important to remember that you are an asset. So, work's not your family. If you follow me on social media, I talk about this a lot. You can make friends at work, but you can meet people that will become part of your sort of family, but work is not your family. And you can be grateful to be employed, but we're not indebted to the places that we work and serve. And I don't even feel that way about my business, right? I am grateful that I have a business and also I have a job to do and I have value to provide. So it can be really, a lot can happen to you when you're moving with that mindset because people can unintentionally take advantage of that.
Yeah.
That was so. I lost every form of connectivity. Obviously, it was not pretty. Here's what I'm really hoping. I'm hoping you didn't yet cover my favorite question, which is, what are some signs that it's time to move on? Did you do that yet?
We did. We talked about it. We tried to solve high capacity.
All right. Well, okay. I'll have to skip that one. Well, then, Tiffany, catch me up, I guess, on what else is left. We have a few minutes, so what else haven't we covered?
Well, folks were rolling in the chat talking about, how do you know when it's time to go and sharing some personal stories, some comments around toxic positivity and how that can negatively impact your choice to exit a professional situation. So I talked a bit, I think you came in on that part, but I definitely think it's important, especially for women identified people, to not get stuck in this idea that we should just be grateful to be employed. I am grateful in life for the things, afforded to me. I am a person of faith, so I believe in gratitude deeply, but in the confines of work, no, we are assets and we're providing value in that place. And it is a business environment, even if it's a nonprofit, even if it's an educational space, doesn't matter. And your work can be deeply impactful, but you are an asset and a value add. And when we forget that, I think it's easy to not advocate for yourself. It's easy to unintentionally or intentionally be taken advantage of, and or not make decisions that we need for ourselves because we feel sort of compelled to not choose what is the best next step for our lives, because we feel like we owe an organization something, but like that can be really dangerous, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that loyalty has to go both ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see a question from Tisha. What systems do you use to reach goals?
Oof. Whew. So no, I'm just shaking my head. Y'all, okay, it's a wild time. My daughter is 4, she's on spring break, so like getting myself together to hop online has been a feat. So that question just took me back. But systems to reach goals. So I think a couple of things that I do annually, in the same way that we do annual reviews at work, I do that for myself. And I break it out into different segments of life, sort of like finances, health, professional, learning, family, etc. And I create sort of a top line, high level goals that I want to hit in each of those segments. And then I reverse engineer what I need to do each month to make those actually happen. And then I do quarterly check-ins on those areas to make sure that I'm like moving the needle on whatever that sort of macro goal is. Other systems, I have a couple of my best friends in the world. We're all on very different professional paths, but we're accountability partners for each other. We don't share every single thing on our goal sheet, but if there's something big and scary, we've probably shared it with each other, and we check in just enough to make sure that everyone feels well supported. So I think accountability partners are very important in life. If nothing else, they can kind of help jolt you back to reality when your confidence starts to wane. And I am a big calendar person. I put everything on my calendar. So if it's like not there, it doesn't exist, quite literally. And one thing I would offer is that we are talking so much about career and life tonight, or it's tonight where I am, I'm on the East Coast, but don't forget yourself. I have been really leaning into this concept around setting goals that are tied to your personal well-being, because it's important for your humanity, but it absolutely impacts your creativity and the way that you show up professionally, whatever that means to you. So hope that helps.
That's great. I had a client, he was the vice president when I worked at Amazon, and he had this table that he used to keep, and he shared it with me, and he would just have a few goals each, and it was work, community, family, and self. And he would just always kind of keep that updated in front of him alongside of his work goals, which I thought was quite brilliant. And then I have heard of people, I have another friend who, it's 2 women, and they go away once a year and do what they call their personal strategic planning, which I think is such a great idea, right? We usually invest that time in the work goals and the work plan, and we forget to do the self goals and the self plan. There's another great question. Any advice on how to balance your work-life flow compared to coworkers who are always on, burning out, stressing out, and see work as a sport that they need to win? Wow, I would say first, I might leave that company. That's, actually just a brief thought on that, which is, I really did learn this over the years of I need to work for organizations that value everything, right? Not just the volume. Here's what I think. I worked at Microsoft and Amazon. Those are both really known to be very competitive organizations. And what I realized, there was this sort of quality bar, right? But let's assume whatever, 80 or 90% of people are working at quality. Everything else was volume, right? And it was the structures that were set up at the time I worked there were very competitive. So forced ranking, bonus based on a curve. And so at the end of the day, if you were doing a good job, the only way to do better, get rated better, get more money, it was to outwork in terms of volume and hours the person sitting next to you. And to me, that's not a great environment. And just, it is a recipe for burnout. So I also look at the system and structure and say, is this where I want to be? And can I succeed the way I want to succeed in this job and live my life the way I want to live my life? Answer was no a few times, right? Which is why I made some moves. But what about you, Tiffany? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
It's just not a sustainable way of being, right? And it's not, I think there are definitely large organizations that don't care about churn because they're getting that volume. and that's fine for them. But I think for me, I'm team therapy. I worked in a very painful environment, not because it was high volume, it was just like a really horrible leader, and their style for distributing work and projects was like, oh, you do a great job and you always get it done, so I'm just going to give you more. And I will never forget the day that, she said, I mean, but you always do it, so I know you will. And again, I'm a recovering workaholic. So, I wasn't working in investment banking. I certainly wasn't making enough money to work 80 hours a week, but I was because I was like, I can do this, And at some point, either you are going to be physically unwell, your mental health is going to be challenged, or your work product is going to fall off. Like, it's not a sustainable way of living. So if other people are doing that and it's not coming from above you, that's just sort of how these people sort of are mismanaging their own anxiety and stress, then I think creating boundaries between you and them is really important, as long as you are hitting your sort of key deliverables at work. If this is like the organization is encouraging this, then I think it's time to exit. Yeah. Personally.
Yeah. Brene Brown talks a lot about the hustle, and this is one of those things that we're often raised with, that I need to achieve to be valued, to be liked, to be accepted. And so, I mean, I'm driven and I'm type A and all, whatever, right? But I'm definitely done working the 60 and 80-hour work weeks. And I think when we see people doing that, there's that systemic reasons why they might be doing it. Might also be an internal reason that is personal to them about, this is the only way I know to add value in the world or to feel recognized and appreciated in the world. And I would say if that is you, it doesn't mean you can't grow out of it. But if that's not you, like, kudos to you, right? If you're like, hey, I know that I want to do a great job, and then I want to leave work, and then I have other interests and other things, and I value spending time with family or whatever it may be, like, good job, right? And again, back to that, don't worry about the comparison, right? Because maybe they have a different goal than what you have. Mm-hmm. Well, I know we have 10 minutes. I feel like we should turn back over to Kylie and Sandhya, or unless there are any other questions, but we should allow some time to wrap up. Yeah. I see one more. What's this question for Tiffany? What advice do you have for being co-opted? They want what you stand for, but not you.
Well, without much context, I'm going to give that a go.
Or Tisha, do you want to add any context?
I'm trying to be a bit correct here. So the context I would give is like, I know right now with a lot that's happening in a lot of businesses and corporations where people are leaning on people of color or the BIPOC community to be able to speak and stand up and be have their voices in the spaces. And for me personally, that's important. But at the same time, I'm feeling like there's this disconnect between wanting to hear from me, but not wanting me to really, show up in a way that I want to feel fully engaged. Like, I'm feeling boxed in to where I can show up. Like, you have ideas, or you have you're kind of raising the flag on something, but you keep getting stopped on it. So I don't know. I mean, I guess the one part of me is like, you still want to be engaged, you still want to be there, it's still important to you, but how do you still navigate kind of being limited and shut down in many other ways? Does that make sense? I'm trying to.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I'm catching what you're putting down, as the young people say.
I was hoping you were able to get my telepathy, Tiffany.
I got you. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, my honest opinion is that to save yourself first, because you can continue pouring and pouring and pouring, like, and your sand, like the sand that you're pouring is not being, if you're not sort of collaborating on how that sand is shaped, then you're just sort of pouring and pouring and pouring, right? And that's draining. I think if it is outside, if what you're offering is like ad hoc to your sort of core work within an organization, you know, I'll be honest, I'm sort of at this stage where I think and deeply believe in the power of our voices and what we can contribute. And also, we don't have to be sort of the pinnacle or the beacon of diversity work. And we don't have to sort of pour to the point where we don't have anything left for that core impact work that we're doing, right? And that feels very challenging to say, because what I'm suggesting is that you take the good, which might mean leaning out of ad hoc inclusion work. And 10 years ago, I would never have said that. I worked on every committee. I did everything. I joined whatever. You invited me to be there. I'm just so happy to be there. I'm so happy we're having these conversations. This work is deeply valuable, but both things can be true. The work and your voice is deeply valuable, but not at your own self-sacrifice. So that now am I saying like, just like, no, I'm not coming back, just leave me alone? I wouldn't say that, you know, but I might slowly dial it back or offer to the level that's not draining you. Because self-preservation, I think Audre Lorde, you know, I quote Queen Audre all the time, you have to save yourself because the movement requires that we are not burned out. And if we are saying that truly equitable and inclusive communities is the movement, if that's the goal, then how could we ever get there if we are so worn thin and just doing mental gymnastics just to show up in a conversation that's like, I think Michaela described it as posture earlier. The movement won't get anything from that, and you won't either. I don't know if that's the answer that you wanted, but save yourself. Mm-hmm. I think our joy and our health and our well-being is a resistance.
That was fabulous. I think that is a wrap. Kylie and Sandhya, any parting words from you both?
Yeah, so again, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us, planning this event alongside Sandhya and Michaela and Tiffany and Mita and Leonie. Has been such a treat. It's only March, but it's been the highlight of my 2021 so far. And it's really our hope that, you know, you'll join us in rebelling against the idea that anyone should have to settle for a job that doesn't support your values, or at least doesn't get you on that track. And I would also say, you know, as we do step into leadership roles, those of us who aren't necessarily in leadership roles yet, that we remember this and that we send the elevator back down, you know, when we do have that, that kind of power to empower folks younger than us, and that we continue to give back. So we're going to end the meeting here, but we will stay on the line for a while if you have any follow-up questions or comments, or you want to connect further, or you just need some human interaction. We're here for you. But yeah, that's it. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. This was awesome.
Yeah,
and thank
really.
You for, yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead, Michaela.
I just want to thank you both. Kylie and Sandhya really spearheaded this whole event. All I had to personally do was show up, which was amazing. And I just applaud you. I keep looking at all the younger women here and thinking, I was not where you are when I was your age. I was just working heads down, like no connection, no community, no kind of bringing people together in the way that you have today. So amazing job, both of you.
Yeah, thank you. We had so much fun working on this.
It shows.
Like literally the highlight of the year.
Literally.